In the last episode, we saw Arthur getting his ass kicked by none other than Sir Pellinore, the mysterious knight who had set up camp in the woods and demanded combat from passers-by as sort of a toll. As mentioned, we saw Arthur demonstrate some rather unbecoming traits, as he refuses to accept defeat, going as far as to bait the knight into almost killing him. You might say that this is classic Arthur, a man who'd rather die than be outdone by his adversary, but his youth and brashness most certainly shine through, as he cannot help himself from upping the ante in a bid to overcome the knight, a knight who is clearly far more skilled than him in combat. Arthur would have lost his life too, had it not been for an unlikely saviour in Merlin, who blasts the knight with a sleep spell so that he can retrieve Arthur and escort him away. Of course, Arthur is hardly grateful for Merlin's intervention, and deems this as dishonourable, and that Merlin should have left him to die. Alas, Arthur does not recognise the greater implications that his death would have had. In any case, we then learn that Merlin takes Arthur to a hermit in the woods, who is described as a good man and a great leech, or medic. The hermit, according to Merlin, was renowned for his leeches, and after having examined Arthur, is able to heal him of his wounds. I imagine that despite the beating he'd received, it was Arthur's pride that took most of the battering, and that for the most part, he would walk away from this day a slightly more humbled man. We are told that once he is feeling better, he and Merlin depart from the leech's lodging, and continue on their route through the forest. Having had his sword broken apart by Sir Pellinore in the fight, Arthur remarks that he has no sword to hold. Merlin tells him that this is not a problem, because nearby there is a grand sword, and it shall be Arthur's to possess. So they rode through the woods until they came upon a lake. A lake, we are told, was broad and flowed with fair water. In the midst of this lake, Arthur noticed an arm clothed in white samite that held up a fair sword from the waters. "Lo," said Merlin, "yonder is that sword that I spoke of." With that, they both spotted a damsel striding through the lake, a woman which Arthur is stunned by. He asks Merlin as to the identity of this mysterious woman, to which Merlin reveals that this was the Lady of the Lake, and that within the lake itself was a rock, and there in that rock is as fair a place as any on earth, and richly beseen, and that this damsel, this Lady of the Lake, would come to Arthur, and that if he spoke courteously to her, she would present him with the very sword from the lake. And so the damsel struts her way towards Arthur, and salutes Arthur, and Arthur, ladies' man that he is, salutes her back. He asks her what sword it is that she possesses, for it is a glorious sword, and one he would be honoured to wield. The Lady of the Lake reveals that the sword in question belongs to her, but that she would happily give the sword to him if he gives her a gift in return. Like my old man always said, nothing in this world is free. The Lady of the Lake, an ethereal woman to say the least, probably recognised Arthur's stature, and might have even known as to who he was, and so she seeks to get something out of the transaction. Now, I don't blame you for thinking that Arthur, uncontrollable horny dog that he was, would then proceed to unzip his pants and give the Lady of the Lake the gift of life. But no, Arthur actually responds in a far more gentlemanly fashion, probably on the account that Merlin had previously told him to behave himself when speaking to her, and instead he asks her to name her price. "Well," said the damsel, "go ye into yonder barge, and row yourself to the sword, and take it and the scabbard with you, and I will ask my gift when I see my time." So you see, the Lady of the Lake intended to keep her cards close to her chest, and while she does surrender the sword to Arthur, we now see that he is in her debt. Pleased with these terms, Arthur accepts the sword, a sword we would later learn is the legendary blade known as Excalibur. Now, we don't see any more from the Lady of the Lake in this chapter, and we are quickly ushered back onto the road with Arthur and Merlin, who come once again upon a rich pavilion, the very same pavilion belonging to Sir Pellinore. Luckily for Arthur though, the knight wasn't there, for Merlin explained that a knight named Eglum, who was one of Arthur's men, had come to fight Sir Pellinore as well, but that he too had been beaten. Unlike Arthur though, Eglum had fled the battle, and Sir Pellinore had given him chase. How Merlin knows any of this is unknown, but he also determines that given the direction that Pellinore had chased Eglum, he would be returning via the same road in which he and Arthur now travelled on. Excitement rushes over Arthur, and he is eager for this confrontation, so that he can avenge the fallen Sir Griflet, and now perhaps, more importantly, his own bruised ego. He produces Excalibur and declares, "Now have I a sword, now will I wage battle with him, and be avenged on him." But Merlin puts an end to this brashness and tells him that there is no honour to be had in fighting Sir Pellinore now, because he is weary from chasing Eglum. He tells that if Arthur fights him now, this would be dishonourable, and that no one will pay him respect for having defeated a man who was already tired. He also tells Arthur, as he did at the end of the last chapter, that Sir Pellinore will actually prove to be quite a useful ally in the future, and so it is probably best that he abandon this foolish quest of revenge and just let it go. He also explains that Sir Pellinore will come to marry Arthur's sister, and so, in order to not make a situation any messier than it needs to be, he should just swallow his pride and put this all behind him. Having recognised Merlin's wisdom, Arthur concedes and promises that he will not attack Sir Pellinore when they cross paths. Then Arthur begins to admire Excalibur and is happy that he has acquired such a fine piece of metal. But Merlin quizzes him as to whether he prefers the sword or the scabbard. Naturally, Arthur declares that he prefers the sword, for what use would a scabbard have other than to house the steel when not in use? But Merlin yet again proves the gap in their knowledge, going on to call Arthur unwise because the scabbard, unbeknownst to anyone except Merlin of course, is an enchanted scabbard, and that it protects he who wields it by preventing him from bleeding. The scabbard is worth 10 of the swords, Merlin tells him, for whiles ye have the scabbard upon you, ye shall never lose blood, be ye never so sore wounded, therefore keep well the scabbard always with you. Yet again we see Merlin pulling out knowledge from nowhere, and this allows him to keep his hold over Arthur. Annoyingly, it appears he is telling the truth in regards to his proclamations in this instance, for the scabbard does prove to be of great value to Arthur in the coming conflicts. The roles between Merlin and Arthur always seem to be reset, for no matter how far Arthur strays, Merlin is always able to rein him back in and re-establish some sort of hold over him, whether this be through the outright threat of God's anger or by declaring some profound magical wisdom about the future or about his well-being. So they ride towards Carleon, and just like Merlin had predicted, they do indeed cross paths with a returning Sir Pellinore. Or at least, Merlin does. Perhaps uncertain as to whether Pellinore would ignore Arthur as he passed by, Merlin places an invisibility spell over Arthur, so that he may pass by undetected and unbothered. Once more, we see Merlin trying to protect Arthur from harm. Only this time, he does so without bragging to Arthur, and without expecting some kind of gratitude. You might say that by this, Merlin really does care about Arthur. Or perhaps he wasn't protecting Arthur from Sir Pellinore, but quite the opposite. He may have made Arthur undetectable, both by sight and hearing, so that Pellinore could not respond to any trash talk that Arthur had no doubt prepared for him. Arthur notes, "I marvel that the knight would not speak," implying that he probably did talk some smack to him as they passed by, but that Pellinore did not respond, for he could not perceive Arthur in the first place. In any case, Merlin gets his way again, given that no further confrontation takes place, and Arthur is restored safely back at Carleon. Once home, Arthur is welcomed by his people, and instead of jeering him for his failure against Sir Pellinore, is instead welcomed with relief. In fact, it could be argued that Arthur is met with even more respect, not for losing, but for having the courage to ride alone into the woods and face down Sir Pellinore at all, especially considering what he'd already done to Sir Miles and Sir Griflet. With this in mind, Arthur learns a valuable lesson, that it isn't necessarily the victorious who are always celebrated, nor is it the victorious who are always the hero, but instead, he who is willing to put himself in harm's way for the sake of his honour, his friends, and his kingdom. If you've enjoyed today's video, then don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Let me know your thoughts on the adventures of Arthur, and I'll see you in the next episode, where Arthur, under the guidance of Merlin, attempts to murder his son, he who spelled the end of Arthur's reign, the boy known as Mordred. Until next time.